just this week, I've been getting around to a very long-delayed project. And that is that sitting in my garage for the last 2 years, waiting to be built, is our COVID gazebo and outdoor shelter, so that we could, in theory, entertain guests. I'm a little late. I always seem to have 1,000 other projects on the go, and the one that sits in the garage gets left, okay? And finally, I'm getting the little tap on the knuckles, like, come on, where's the action? I want this built. So anyway, I finally have my grandson help me lay out. He's like, well, all these numbered parts. I know it's kind of paint by numbers, but at the same time, there's about 3,000 pieces to assemble. And on the front of it, there's a very clear instruction, not only part by part and piece by piece, but it's warning. And it shows you a picture of totally level ground, and then next to it, a picture of slightly uneven ground. Do not build here, build here. The vision of Amos was of a plumb line, something that gives you a measurement, okay? These days we do it with lasers, I think, where you can know that you're level. So having carefully 2 years ago laid some beautiful concrete, our concrete contractor said, now you'll have to make sure that it goes away from the house. You don't want rain coming towards the house. So we're going to put a little incline down here. Of course, that's a great idea. We want it to drain away from the house. And then I thought, oops, that's another problem. Now I'm going to have to pour some more forms, and I'm going to have to measure that everything is level and square, so that when we put these posts on, the slightest bit, if I'm out even by that much, a few thousandths or a quarter millimeter or a few millimeters, that will start to show itself when I get to the top. And eventually something very tiny will become a major problem. You know what they say, measure twice and cut once and all of that stuff, all the rules of construction. So I know that you have to get it plumb, square, even, flat, all the other words you want to use before you begin. Jesus tells a story to someone who's out to kind of trick him. And there's one little phrase in the Hebrew Bible, and if you measure it flat and square, it comes out perfect. But if you go off by the slightest bit, the kilter will reveal itself, and you're in big trouble. It goes like this. In the Hebrew language, there isn't really the verb to be in most situations. So in poetry and in prose, you can't always tell. You have to kind of infer and guess, and usually you can get it exactly right. So there is absolutely no dispute in my mind, and in the majority of commentators, that the central part of the creed, the foundational creed of Judaism, that's incidentally right, of course, at the beginning of every Book of Common Prayer service, to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself, means exactly to love your neighbor as you love yourself. But the Hebrew is capable of a little twist. To love the neighbor like yourself, if you had a particular turn of mind, could mean to love the neighbor who is like yourself. Notice the difference? To love your neighbor like yourself could be twisted from underneath. And you could make uneven ground with this if you wanted to. And you could make it say, you should love the neighbor who is like yourself. Now, is that a problem? You think, well, charity begins at home. Of course it's not a problem. Of course we should love the people who belong to our family, our tribe, our nation. Of course we should love the people who share common values with us. doesn't only seem like common sense, it seems like a natural and easy thing to do. But there's a twist, and that's exactly the twist that this scroll keeper, or lawyer, this interpreter of the law wants to see if he can get at with Jesus. Now, Jesus tells stories, just like I try to build gazebos. I'll give you an update on that in a few weeks' time. I might need help. In fact, I know I'll need help. Jesus always comes at its slant. He wants to reach into our hearts. For those who want straight, uncomplicated, just give me a yes or no. Just give me, affirm my prejudice is kind of what he's being thrown at. What's being thrown at him. And Jesus says, well, let me tell you a story. It's like this. And he goes straight to the problematic part. If you are a purist of any religion, creed, ethnicity, whatever your dividing point is, if you are a purist, Jesus has a little story that's problematic for you. And he wants to straighten out that piece that is off. It's really a difference, as the theologian Marcus Borg says, between the politics or the ethics of purity and the politics and the ethics of compassion. And this is the setup. The uneven ground of purity will always tend towards protecting my turf, our turf. It's at the root of all kinds of nationalism, and on this continent of Turtle Island, it reveals itself in the most tragic theological mistake we have ever made. That God gave to the suffering white peoples of Europe a new homeland, a Christian Zionism, a place where they could all finally be free from all of the plagues and wars and unjust kingdoms and come to have their own place. And you think, how wonderful. Isn't that great? And then you think, no, there's something missing in that. Of course, what is missing is that there were already people here. And what is also missing is that we, fleeing from these European misery kingdoms, didn't want to do all the work ourselves, so we thought we'll get the menial work done by people who don't look like us. We'll import them from Africa and enslave them. 2 days ago, the Prime Minister of this country went to Truro, Nova Scotia, along with others, dignitaries and ministers of various kinds. And he paid tribute to a battalion of black soldiers from the First World War. And why did he do that? Because these people were given a very specific second and third class citizenship in the Canadian Army. They were first of all put into menial tasks of clearing trees and building roads. They were backup people. They were not to mix with the rest of the soldiers on the front line. Secondly, they were given inadequate medical care, inadequate food, and even in death were not given dignity. This, folks, is the politics of purity. This is the tragic idea that you only love, really, the people who are like yourself. And that you put the people who are not quite like yourself, the minorities of this world, into a secondary and lower status. And Jesus says, well, what if there was one of these minority people who just came along the road and you're so concerned? Like, if you're a Levite or a priest, you will become technically impure and unable to do your job if you touch a dead body. So if you see someone dying at the side of the road, you would be unable to do your temple service for the next week. So you think, logically, I'm needed more over here, okay? So in a certain way, there is a logic to what you do. Just as there's a logic to saying, during COVID, I won't see anybody or breathe in anyone's direction. I'll stay at home and close all the doors. It has a logic to it. Of course, it has another price. Isolation has a different level of suffering for us and for others. That's another story. There is a logic to the Levite approach to life. It's not wrong to have public health directives. It's not wrong to have rules that make sense in one place. But what happens when you come face to face with human need that doesn't fit with your rules? Then we are put into this choice. Who is our neighbor? And Jesus, of course, gives us the story of the one who is the minority, the outsider, the mixed blood, the untrusted ones, who is the only one in this situation who actually sees human need and responds to it. He will place his desire, his compassionate instinct to care for the well-being of another, even at his own expense, ahead of the membership in his tribe. Jesus says, this is the practice you need to undertake. This is the road you need to walk. You know, if you walk from Jerusalem to Jericho, it's a long walk, and it's all downhill. Which may make it sound easy, but Jericho is a city that is under a curse. Jerusalem is the holy city, the beauty, the perfection of beauty. And so to walk down that road is dangerous, because it means you're going, if you are true and pure in your tribal membership, as our First Nations version says, you don't want to mix with something dubious. So Jesus sets us up for this downward journey that all of us need to make. To come off the high horse of our own perfection and beauty, of our instinct to only support the majority and identify with the majority, and to come down to the places that we thought were otherwise unclean. To open our eyes and to be influenced by what we see along the way, so that if someone is hurting, we respond. And to build not only our personal, but our corporate, our cultural, our political, our whole framework can be reoriented around this true loving. This is our greatest tradition, the triple commandment. Love God with all your heart. Love your neighbor and love yourself. There is an appropriate kind of self-loving. And if we truly love and care for ourselves, we will see that these other people are part of us. Whatever we define as other is truly our neighbor. And there is no real distinction. There is nothing of our ethnicity, gender self-definition, background, age, ancestry, that can ever unmake us from being a neighbor to someone else. Let us walk the road of reconciliation. Let us measure a level ground and set a plumb line that has this baseline, so that as we build, we will build something that is truly foursquare, because it includes all, because it reaches out in love to all.